Hello, we're going to walk through how to set your Azure Active Directory to allow secure authentication method registration. So if you think of the scenario where you have a new user who's joining the organization, you want to get them as secure as possible from day one. So we're going to show you how to configure the tenant to enable that security, and then we're going to walk through a new user starting on their day one and how they're going to utilize the capabilities to register and utilize those strong passwordless credentials and multi-factor. So first, we're going to start by logging into our portal. In this case, I've logged into the Azure Portal with a global admin for an Azure Active Directory tenant. Now, this can be done with lesser privileges, which are documented, but for the sake of this demo, we're going to use a global administrator. So we're going to launch our Azure Active Directory tenant. And you can see here, this is just your standard dashboard. So if this is a brand new tenant, all new tenants start out with a feature called security defaults. And we're actually going to disable our security defaults because we're utilizing another feature of the Azure AD platform called conditional access. This will give us the ability to create granular and complex policies to meet our business needs to secure our environment. So in this case, I'm going to disable the security defaults. And I'm going to say, why am I disabling it? Because I'm actually going to be using conditional access. Now, I actually can utilize conditional access to enable a lot of the scenarios that are implemented with security defaults, but you'll see it gives me a more expressive pattern to build them from. So I've disabled security defaults, and now I'm going to go to the security blade in the portal. Now, by going to the conditional access, I can see that I do not have any policies today. And we do define some recommended common scenarios. So if you click on this, you can see the documentation. Some of these scenarios are blocking legacy authentication, requiring multi-factor for administrators, requiring multi-factor for Azure management, and requiring multi-factor for all users. These are definitely policies that I'd recommend almost every organization deploy in their environment. But we have some additional ones. Maybe we want to use risk-based dynamic policies using identity protection. Or in this case, I'm going to require strong authentication to actually register other security information, such as our authentication methods. So we're actually going to create a policy that will require using MFA to set up MFA. It seems a little bit counterintuitive, but what we want to do is we want to make sure that we can't register or manage strong credentials with only a password. Because if an attacker was able to get a password, we don't want them to be able to upgrade their credential. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new policy. So we're going to walk through the process here. Now, typically, because these are the common policies, I label them as such. Now, you may have your own custom or test policies, report only. Use a naming convention that makes sense to you and your organization. So again, I'm going to say require MFA for security info registration using TAP. And I'll explain what TAP is in a second. So here, we're going to scope it to all users, but we're actually going to exclude some sets of users. We're actually going to exclude our guest users because we're going to use the temporary access pass credential, which at this present time is in preview and is not supported for guest user management today. And now I'm also going to exclude our Bright Glass account. So in this case, this would be an account that you don't really use in your day-to-day activities. But because I'm actually utilizing a test tenant, I'm actually going to exclude my global admin. This is to say that if there was an issue, you don't want to lock out an account or from being able to manage your environment. You can read the how to set up Bright Glass accounts in our documentation though. So now we're going to say, well, who is in scope of the policy? And now, what is the scope of the policy? So I'm actually going to pick, usually most policies are focused on applications, but in this case, I'm focused on user actions. So when a user goes to register security information, I want them to be in scope of this policy. So now I'm going to go to controls, and this is where I'm going to require that when a user goes to register their security info, we're going to require multi-factor authentication. If they cannot do multi-factor authentication, then they're blocked from doing that action. So again, if I have a password, not strong credentials, I cannot set and manage stronger credentials. So make sure that the policy is on, and we're going to create that policy. So we can see I have this common policy now available to me here. But let's talk about what kind of authentication methods that I'm going to enable. So in my environment, I'm actually going to go back to authentication methods. And I can see these are some of the default methods that are on in the tenant. FIDO2 security keys, a passwordless credential, could also be used for multi-factor authentication. Microsoft Authenticator, the mobile application for iOS and Android that is used for multi-factor authentication, and as you'll see, account management and passwordless phone sign-in. It also acts as a mobile token broker for giving you SSO on mobile devices, so I would highly recommend deploying this to all users in your environment. But one that I'm looking at here is the temporary access pass. So this allows me to generate a purpose-built credential with some controls. This credential can be used as short-lived, meaning it can only be, once it's issued, it only lists for an hour. I may want to set a maximum of 8 hours. I really have a policy that I can set here. And I can say, can it be used more than once, or is it a one-time only? And is there a length that the credential has to be when it's generated? And you can edit these based upon whatever your criteria is. I'm actually going to leave them the defaults. So now, we have set up we've turned off our security defaults. We've enabled a conditional access policy that requires MFA for registering of authentication methods. And in this scenario, I'm going to generate the temporary access pass. Now, one thing I forgot, so let's actually go into the users. And if I go into the older portal settings, I go to per user MFA. Now, you really don't want to be enabling per user MFA at this time. You actually want to be using conditional access. But currently, at the time of this video, enabling some of the core methods is still in this portal. In this case, I'm not enabling phones. I'm not enabling text messages to phones. I'm actually only going to enable notification through mobile app and verification code through mobile app or hardware token. So these are my settings here. I'm not allowing app passwords, and I'm not setting trusted IPs, and I'm not using the remember multi-factor on trusted device settings. So we're going to save that, even though that was the settings before. So now I have my tenant set up how I would like for starting out. I would recommend the other common conditional access policies, but for the sake of this tutorial, we're going to walk forward, adding a new user. So we're going to add a new user. Now this can be done through your on-premises environment. Maybe you've set up your HR provisioning directly to AD or Azure AD using Azure AD provisioning, so you'll have automation of those users being provisioned. But in this case, if you're managing your users in the cloud, I'm creating them from the portal, or this can be done through automation like PowerShell as well. So we're actually going to create an account, and we're going to call this one Jen. So Jen is onboarding into our environment, and I'm going to give her a first name. I'm just going to say, let's use Jen A. Now you'll notice that it's going to auto-generate me a password. I'm actually not going to use a password at all because I don't want to start the user with a password that I know I have to give to them, and it can be used across many different surfaces. So we're actually going to create this user without a password. So how are they going to onboard into the environment? So Jen is being created now. We're actually going to turn that off there. And she exists. Now, again, you can automate this, but we're doing it manually here for now. So I can see we have provisioned her, and because I've actually enabled group-based licensing policies, she'll automatically be assigned licenses for Azure AD Azure AD P2, and I believe I have M65 E5 in this test environment, but that will happen shortly. But now, what I'm actually going to look at is her authentication methods. So we can see I don't have any methods for her. So I look at her profile, we don't have any phone information, we haven't set any of this here yet. I'm going to go here, and you can see as an admin, I can add a method. I could add an email, which is used for things like SSPR, a phone number, which again could be used maybe for SSPR, based on my settings, but I'm actually going to generate the temporary access pass. I can generate it with a delayed start, meaning maybe Monday morning. It gets generated automatically, and I can send it to their manager, who can verify their identity and provide it to them. But in this case, we're going to generate it now, and we're going to say it's good for 1 hour, right? And I can set this up to the policy. If you remember, it was 8 hours in the policy. We're going to leave it at the default of 1 hour. So we're also going to set this as one-time use. And what that means is I can only use it one time to authenticate. So I want them to be able to take this credential, give it to them, utilize their mobile phone to set up a stronger credential, such as Microsoft Authenticator, phone sign-in, and push notification for MFA. So we're going to say add. So now we have generated the tab. And now the user can go to the web portal here if they have a kiosk or if they're using maybe their manager's computer. But in this case, we're going to do it through the mobile phone experience. So Jennifer starts on her Monday morning. She meets her manager or her recruiter or onboarding person who verifies their identity and provides the tab. They give simple instructions to open their mobile phone, whether it's iOS or Android, and go to their mobile app store. So in this case, this is just an Android phone that I have connected through remotely. So we're going to look at Microsoft Authenticator app, and we're going to install it. So while this is installing, it's relatively straightforward. We've recently updated the sign-up experience to streamline it for what I'm showing you here. So the end user is going to install the mobile application, and it should pop up in this user app tray, and it's already here. Now you're going to see when I'm going to launch the application, it's actually not going to show something on the screen, and that's because by default the application has a setting that says do not allow screenshots, in this case screen capture. So I'm actually going to allow screenshots on for the purpose of this demo so you can see the screen that you're seeing here. Okay, so now that make sure I've closed it, let me close it. And now I'm going to relaunch the application. You should now be able to see what the experience is. So Jen has opened the application and she's greeted with a wizard saying, hey, you can add an account here. So this is her first time setting this up. We're going to say add account. And because this is a work or school account that's utilizing Azure Active Directory, we're going to sign in here. Now, because I have this credential, I actually can sign in here. Even though I don't have a password, I have the temporary access pass, which will allow me to sign in and set up this phone. So we're going to say Jen ID partner.xyz. And Azure Active Directory signing in recognizes that I have a temporary access pass assigned to me, and it's going to prompt me for it. Now, if I had a password, maybe I could use it, but if I use the password here, I'm going to be blocked because I set the conditional access policy saying you need to use strong authentication. In this case, the temporary access pass is considered strong authentication for this purposes. A password is not. And because I don't have MFA yet, I can't utilize a password. So here, we're actually going to type in the tab that you see on the screen over there. And if I could type it correctly. Great. So Jennifer's being asked, you've authenticated, we're going to set up phone sign-in. Phone sign-in is a mobile passwordless solution, meaning that when she has to authenticate to any application that's integrated to Azure AD, she can use passwordless methods like phone sign-in here. So she'll be asked to show a number on the screen, and the notification will pop up on her mobile phone. She'll enter the same number displayed on the screen and then approve the authentication on her mobile device, never typing in a password or anything else in that mobile application or that desktop application. So what we're going to see here is that we're going to register the device and we're going to set a screen lock, right? So this phone actually has a screen lock already set, but if a user did not have one, it would be required at this point. So we're going to register. And what's happening is this is exchanging information between the phone and Azure Active Directory, registering the mobile phone. This is creating the credential that Jennifer will use by authenticating on her device and presenting the strong credentials to Azure AD to sign into the application. And that's it. So her account is added. She is set up for phone sign-in, which is primary strong authentication. She also has two-step verification for push notifications. Maybe she'll get an MFA push for other tasks. Or maybe there's scenarios like password reset for one-time passcodes. So I've said finish, and it reminds me that app lock is enabled. This means that by default, when she launches the application, she's going to have to enter her PIN or biometric on that device. So now Jennifer Jen can now and look at the account she has. She actually can go and look at managing the account. She could change her password here if she knew her password, but she doesn't know her password because right now she's passwordless. She can update her security info. Maybe she wants to add another phone or a tablet. Or in this case, she may also want to look at recent security or sign-in activity that's happened on her account. Now, it's a brand new account, so there's nothing in here at this point, but it's going to sign in. And we're going to say Jen, ID partner, and you're going to see what that passwordless experience looks like. So that number gets displayed on the screen and Jennifer gets a notification. She has to type in that code that was shown on the screen and then say, yes, this is me. So she's being challenged for a biometric now, and she's approving it, and now she's approved, and she'll sign in. And as expected, there's no sign-in activity because her account was just created, but I'm just showing it as an example here. So since I'm launching back into the application, I'm being asked to biometric in. So now Jennifer is ready to go. She has her passwordless credentials, and she can go and sign into maybe her My App. So I'm actually just going to open a quick guest here, and we're actually going to sign in to the My Apps portal, Microsoft.com. And Jen, ID partner, XYZ. And again, we're going to get that passwordless phone sign in. They're showing the number, and on the phone itself, let me pull that up. I'm being asked to enter that number and hit yes, and then I approve it, saying that yes, this is me. And now she is going to be signed in. Now this is a keep me signed in prompt. I'm going to leave that on there by tenant defaults. And now Jen, she's signed in and she can access all those applications. Now remember, I said she was automatically assigned licenses for these applications, but if they were using things like identity governance, maybe she'd be assigned other applications, she'd be ready to go and start her first day at work, ready to securely work and collaborate. But maybe there's a scenario where she has to have a password. Maybe she needs to sign some legacy application that you haven't enabled into Azure AD, and she has to get a password. How would she get that password? She doesn't know it, but because she has strong authentication already, she can actually go and set a password now, because our policy said that if she does not know her password, she has to be able to reset her password using Azure AD self-service password reset. So QMGX. And it says, oh, I've got to enter the code. Now I need to have the phone that I've registered. And what I'm actually going to go and do is go back to my remote phone. We're going to go and launch Authenticator. And remember, because I have app lock on, I have to authenticate. Now you can see that one-time passcode that's generating there. I've got 13 seconds to go into here. And 212420. I'm successful, and now I can sign into here. Now this is using the Azure AD password protection to set better passwords. We want to move your users away from passwords, period, but we understand that you may still have them. So we want to give you better passwords, even if you have to have passwords. So now I've got a password, and I can go and sign into all my applications and what I need to do my business. So I have passwordless methods, which I want to use for predominantly most of my workloads by bringing those apps into Azure AD. I could use passwords if necessary, but as a goal, we want to strive to getting as passwordless as possible. So that is it. That is the experience from setting up security information for the configuration for what the end user experience is. Most of my experience, most users, once they enable passwordless, they really don't want to go back. Nobody likes passwords except hackers. So we want to be able to make it as simple as possible and as secure as possible for end users. But we've also given tools to actually look at your environment and say, well, how good are you at configuring these kind of security policies? So if I actually go back into the security blade here, I can go to authentication methods, and I can look at what is the activity in my environment. So I could see, oh, what are the users who are registered and what kind of methods are they registered? Again, this is a test lab, so not a lot of activity, but you can see the different types of credentials that are being registered for users. So if I have a campaign, I can easily monitor how that is progressing. And you have some metrics here, so you can start gauging how well you're deploying. But we actually want to look at what are we actually utilizing? So we can see that in this lab, there's a lot of single-factor authentication, and now, because I'm walking through a demo here, multi-factor authentication. And you can see the different types of credentials by sign-in. Predominantly, I have Windows Phone for Business, some passwords from demos like this. Maybe it's the app push notification, tap, FIDO2, or the passwordless phone sign-in. You can see this will give you the ability to see what your users are actually utilizing and planning to keep them more secure. And then finally, I wanted to point out the identity secure score here. So this is a great way for you to measure how secure your configuration is against other industries like your type, and then you want to be able to track over time how you're enabling more secure configurations, making your organization more secure. So I hope that was a good example of how to onboard new users to passwordless phone sign-in and push notification MFA in a very secure and easy way that makes them want to be able to be productive and secure day one. Thank you very much.